7 years of hard work turned into a painful kick-out for my very own guild. They were so unaware that they didn't even realize their own hidden abilities existed until the moment they finally met the man who could make them forget everything else for a while longer. 7 years of wasted hours in a dumpster at the Kyo's Guild are now part of my story. He never looked like a real hero. He was just his own little shield that kept the rest of us from getting hurt, even when life and death were right on the line. When I stood up to face the boss in a single stand, I felt my armor shatter and hear my bones howling out of pain as I watched him vanish alone, begging for help that simply did not arrive. I found a strange look in my face instead of gratitude for the help I needed. Suddenly, when the beast finally crashed to the floor, its scary faces slipped away with it like a heavy sack. The leader, Guts, threw me into the rubble mid-rain while the sky mocked my broken face, leaving the cold-blooded aftermath behind. Kim Hyunai was like a massive rock that broke the spirit of anyone who tried to work with him. He laughed about his flaws while Mia stared back, treating her as something very uncool. The news broke that I was kicked out with a shameful loss of $10 million worth of loyalty over 7 years, leaving me in no place to be happy or proud. You should know that $10 million equals roughly $7,000. 7 years ago, I was barely making ends meet, and now I've gone out of business entirely. In that split second, I noticed how they didn't see me as a friend. They saw me only as an item meant for quick use. The universe seems to have a funny twist that makes things go wrong so badly they look like bad luck. In a place where everything was fading away, I saw someone suddenly awake at the top of a crumbling tower. I saw my vision being torn apart by green grids that whispered probability calculations. I walked into a tiny but mighty adventure hall where my fate was decided before I even saw a single person. Sylph waited for a moment before the sky broke open with a powerful blast of mana, and there, where it all happened, was his home. It felt like a heavy stone was dropped off my shoulder and vanished into the swirling blue of the wind, leaving me alone to chase the unseen power that had finally let go. We found our brave hero, and they instantly unlocked a powerful new power known as an elemental class. It lets this person talk to magical creatures and get help from them. You know how the people who fight in the war called them elementalists? It's a truly extraordinary creature, so rare that even the strongest guild members find their power rivals by comparison. The story starts by introducing 3 legendary heroes: Luca Harrison, an England-based elementalist who mastered mist; Malasai Soy Fua, a Samoa hero who mastered water; and Abu Bakr, from Egypt, the master of sand. Each one brings their own unique elemental power to life, proving there are truly different levels of greatness. And now, a new elemental hero is born. Kim is lying on the floor at home right now, but Jihan stands nearby clutching that bright green sphere like at a life raft. You could hear those dark shapes watching you as he walked away into the shadows of his own home. The wind suddenly jumps into Jan's hands and turns the world upside down with her new mastery. Jan is completely bewildered by the sudden change, asking, "What just happened?" as the doors of the guild room begin to open. Kim sits on the sofa to tell everyone she had made a contract with an element, so Jihan checks in on whether that's what it actually meant before they confirm it together. Kim shares a story about how the wind's magic is actually made by Sylph. The girl remembers how Sylph always held on to her mother's old contract, and now she wonders exactly which one came up first when the time is right. Silent in the room, Kim whispers her rejection when she sees him hesitate again. She tells everyone that no one can ever get out of this contract, once she makes it clear that something cannot be changed, and suddenly everything feels too simple to ignore. Jihan stares wide-eyed at the ceiling as she finally says, "You have to make me die for this deal to ever be valid." The silence stretches deafeningly long until she just smiles and takes a deep breath. Jihan feels completely overwhelmed and stammers, asking what he should actually do next. Kim steps forward and lets out a playful laugh, then straightens herself into a confident pose while looking at the boy with that familiar grin. He laughed as she toasted him about signing the epic, jokingly wondering if anyone else had been watching his guilds in the past. He told the protagonist that he had nothing better than a chance to join Epic, and she listened with open eyes. When Kim heard that someone was giving him excellent judgment, his face turned a brilliant shade of crimson, but then the words stopped in mid-sentence before he could finish speaking. The beautiful waifu looks at him with a bright smile and says she'll make sure he learns everything about his favorite power sills. Kim jumps up in surprise after seeing that the main character is so excited about their new abilities. "I'm really ready," he shouts. "Want to test out these special skills right away before anyone else gets a chance." Epic, the man suddenly felt electric excitement as he grabbed a glowing green sphere in his palm and shouted that it was now the perfect moment for his action. This mysterious blue dome sits in the dark, guarding some dangerous spots where monsters hide. The dungeons are ordered by strength, where the stronger bosses correspond directly to their number on the scale. They and Kim head out into the world to find their own path and see what kind of adventure awaits them. The man holding his sword points toward the horizon and shouts, "I'm heading straight to the 5th level in Jan," while Jihan stands beside him, bracing himself for a test of his new skills. Kim was staring nervously all along while looking around. Does she feel something's making her uncomfortable? She nervously whispered that she had never really practiced before and felt terrified. The air suddenly felt thick with shock when Jihan shouted, "Why did you stay so quiet?" Kim then realized her mistake quickly, admitting aloud that it was all too embarrassing as a proud guild leader. They walk into the scary monster zone and decide to take charge of things this round. They glide deeper into the dark with a sword in one hand and Kim gripping her staff, stepping carefully over rubble from ancient conflicts where brave warriors clashed against terrifying beasts. Jan asked Kim to look around for trouble, then she gave him another chance. Kim looks at her radar screen, reporting to the team that the beast is actually a cockatrice hiding deep inside the woods she just walked past. It was just 2 weeks ago when that heavy truck rolled over and left its babies everywhere. Jan steps up and pulls his blade out, making sure to point the very best shots at everything he's ready to do. The air filled with dust and screams as the world turns into rubble. Here, in this burning nightmare of falling walls and scattered ruins, everything feels like life has ended, leaving only the raw heat of battle to breathe. Jihan knew he was truly alone, but decided to take on the heavy burden of being a tank commander while also protecting his friends with an extra hit. Kim feels a strange flicker in her mind as she checks out that area. They kept walking all the way through that dusty parking lot until someone stepped out and made their move. A spotted cockatoo hovers directly behind the driver of his truck as he eats a massive bagel in the middle of the afternoon. And the giant monster looked down at their fragile feet, then heaved his massive wings out to catch everything else while leaving a tiny, hungry piece of meat behind him. Kim and Jihan are both feeling a very heavy weight of pressure that they're all too ready to take on whatever happens next. Jihan rushes over and grabs Kim's arm while the other guy tackles a monster head-on. The giant monster took one step, and that heavy foot hit the earth hard enough to make it shake beneath his boots. He leaps forward like a giant monster and thrusts his massive claw down into the ground with terrifying power. The guard raised his blade right at the moment the attacker hit him. He grinned because he finally understood that he had grown past his old self. Jihan was still clamping down as Kim screamed her name back. Behind the man, she begins to cast a very strong spell. Her glowing eyes fire a powerful beam of pure air, creating a swirling vortex of energy that shakes the room around her. The powerful projectile shatters into two, ripping Jihan and the cockatrice apart, while sending a shockwave through the entire room. Kim can barely hold back the sheer force of that falling beast before it hits the dirt. Jihan celebrates the perfect moment with a triumphant grin, knowing that even though she might look clumsy on camera, she really earned the place to be the top graduate at her school. The group gets lost in their own chatter and nearly misses a flock of extra cockatrices swooping in. She gasps like a trapped cat as she hears the frantic screech of 3 birds flying in reverse, screaming that they're about to hurt each other before they get there. He swings wildly around the room, and suddenly his bright green eyes blaze with a new energy, as if he was ready to do something amazing. His power beams glow like an angry green light, snapping a dragon into place and sending a flash of white above them. The hero stares at the danger and announces his secret move before asking the AI how to dodge. A window materialized right above his head and told him exactly how likely it was that he would dodge if he fell. As soon as the monster charged down at him, there was nothing left but to stand low and stay still. The window confirmed that the success rate had actually been 82%. He looked down at his hand and instantly began summoning that familiar green orb again, his secret superpower called haste. In that split second of lightning, every bird in the clearing was suddenly swept away by the wind and gone forever. He walked right past every beast and turned away, leaving nothing but those scary monster heads sitting on the floor like precious metals. His sword was held high as he turned his gaze toward the dark shadows behind him, watching for any moves that might reveal his newfound superhuman powers. Kim was completely stunned by the incredible feat. He had perfectly used Sill's powers for just under an hour, which left her wondering exactly how such skill could be acquired so quickly. Siha leans forward and stares at him while he strikes a cool, fearless pose in the dark. He tucked the weapon inside his coat and shouted, "Whoa, I gotta fight in the water." He grabs the fluffy feathers ready for treasure, then immediately stops running because he's testing how strong he really is. A sudden spark of magic ignited, causing him to suddenly notice that the world around him isn't quite right anymore. He threw his arms wide and yelped in terror as he realized Seiha was hiding behind her own head. A giant shadow looms over her as another monster jumps in from a side path and crushes everything in its way. The air got so thick with electricity that the sky itself began to squirm. A giant monster lunged forward and slammed a massive claw into the ground, knocking everyone back into a tumble before it could reach them again. A deafening roar blasts out from behind the door as the rain pours down, leaving everyone screaming in shock and terror. She was about to fall right when he grabbed her and saved her from the crushing impact. The hero tucked himself inside her beloved Baguri's soft embrace and asked, "Is it all right?" as he waited for a little girl who could handle his luggage like nothing more than a feather. They both got their guns out and started wondering exactly where the monster had come from. Jihan watched him all along and figured out this was a mutant. His glowing green eyes catch the attention of everyone who watches him and say something about his new superpower. A glitchy light snaps on a screen, and a red warning sign hovers right over the mutant bird as the sky shakes with every calculation it does. Jihan runs forward to shield CI from the beast, begging her to slow down while he's still chasing after the threat with a determined look in his eyes. She caught her breath as the giant clawed down with a burst of terrifying, golden light that made everyone shudder. The bird swoops down like a hungry hunter with its head pinned in its mouth, and the massive wings that open to swallow everything are stretched out like sails catching the wind. As those sharp teeth strike down, Giant reaches out to grab the weapon and shouts a command to Seiha's hand to swing. As the backline pulls away from the crowd, Seiha lets out a powerful burst of magic that shakes everything around her. She swings the heavy blade with a steady, slow breeze that catches the grass and the air alike. The spell held tight, trapping the monster right next to him until Jihan could finally step back and see it. The bird tried to snap at the man like he was about to jump for a punch, but the spell made his legs float so hard they never connected with him. Jihan launched himself like a falling rock, swinging his blade to smash the beast through the earth before the binding spell finally broke free and shattered again. The bird flies up and pops out of the air instantly, snapping its fingers so its voice sounds like an alarm that saves everyone's life. It stands right there in the middle of nowhere, waiting for help. Jihan swings his sharp sword as the sky turns blue with a bright orange fire. In that split second, his old team's harsh words echoed right back in his mind, making him feel like he was carrying too much of a heavy burden. The snap shattered the silence as the creature's sharp teeth closed shut, leaving only a vacuum of sound behind. Jihan suddenly unleashes his wind cutter and turns the screen's colors into a vivid red warning. A single blink turns that tiny bird into multiple juicy pieces of meat. The world swirls around Jihan as he drifts slowly toward the ground, and suddenly, 2 feet stand right beside him, changing the entire scene with a sudden shift in perspective. We glide up to catch a buff dude in a loud Hawaiian tee who's genuinely glowing with pride. He pointed out that the other elementalists seemed completely lost in a mess of things to do all along. Doha Yun, that brave Korean explorer who loves digging through strange stones and listening to the soft hum of the earth beneath our feet, stands at a historic site where ancient secrets are waiting to be discovered. Oh look, the screen has suddenly zoomed out into a dusty ruin where the old streets are covered in black dust, and shadows seem to creep slowly through the foggy air. A mighty gust of wind howls through the rubble as the old tower crumbles into a cloud of black dust. Suddenly, the earth shatters in a violent explosion as a colossal creature with blazing red eyes erupts from the void, and then a swarm of ironclad worms follows its chaotic escape. Doha bursts forward into the chaos, shouting at the monsters to hurry and take his life. He unleashes a huge blue energy blast as he charges toward them. He immediately triggers his provoke skill and launches a massive explosion right before the worm can even dig its way deeper into the earth. A powerful blast shatters the air right at the target spot and shakes everything around it like a thunderstorm before you even get to say what happened. Even though the big guy took a direct hit, he's still trying hard to pin that worm in place. He looked back from the corner and yelled with a loud yelp. "I can't hold on anymore. It's slipping all the way." Cyan Lim swings her weapon as the beast tries to escape, and she tells herself she knows just how to stop it. The shadows close in as she snaps a chain around the dragon's scales, ready to unleash its thunderous roar. The towering beam of electricity didn't just hit. It ripped open their world instantly, shattering their bodies as a wave of agony swept across each one simultaneously. Sean Lim watches in delight as the monsters snap back from their surprise into tiny bits of gold. When the dust finally settles, the air isn't quiet, It's buzzing with a low, static shaking hum like 1,000 tiny sparks dancing around you. She pulls out her staff and beams with excitement as she loudly declares that the team was genuinely horrified by encountering such a small, harmless creature. He doesn't care about his strength anymore. He only wants her to keep firing on target so he never gets hurt again. He rolled his eyes as she tried to speak, then told her to run away so the bad thing wouldn't happen again. But the moment they left the room, a giant worm lunged in and grabbed her. Panic set in instantly because she couldn't think of anything else to do. She instinctively sprinted toward Jihan as a blast of icy wind slammed into her side, leaving her breath catching in her throat and shattering the illusion that was holding her back. It's gone from Jihan's guild, so she can't see anyone watching her back anymore. The terror seized him as the darkness rolled in from above, slamming the last inch of the worm against his chest like an avalanche. Shan Lim gasped for air, stunned by what just happened to the world below. It was Guts, that fiery red-haired warrior who had brought the heroism back to the battlefield after all this time. She leans against the wall to save her life while he strikes an aggressive pose to show how much he cares about her. The camera zooms in as the battlefield becomes a graveyard full of dead worms, all wiped clean by the Kiro's guild's blood. Shan and Lilim were both sitting inside the water tank, huddled together as if they had to conserve energy for a long swim, while she suddenly yelled about being completely drained of energy. The giant looked serious as he spoke, pointing out how the monsters reacted in a way that reminded him of superpowered mutants. Xianlim didn't believe she could make sense of that fact. She insisted the only thing about them was nothing more than ordinary trash mobs. Suddenly, Guts stepped forward and shut down the excuse immediately. He declared that there was simply no strange thing happening to them. They were just giant worms. Guts grips his fist hard as the storm inside him turns into pure fire, and he shouts, "Explain." A frustrated man punched the wall and asked why those guys had fought so hard to defeat so simple foes. A tall man named the Big Guy and Sean Lilim are frantically flailing as they try to craft a witty excuse for their sudden act of stammering. In that moment, a dark shadow flickers across the background, ready to turn the trick on its head. As they stumbled back from the exit, their eyes widened so wide they looked like a bunch of scared bees, signaling that something terrifying was happening inside them right now. She was frozen mid-brawl on the floor, clutching her weapon as if it held the power to turn the lights off, staring down with eyes wide enough to see ghosts. Her terrifying gaze froze her as she whispered the news from afar. District 2 is safe for now. Guts spins around and barks her name, reminding her she was being too much. The veins inside him are popping like angry bubbles on his forehead, while he scolds her fiercely for being so careless, and immediately she freezes, knowing exactly what's happening behind his stern words. He tells a joke, but his friend can't hear him clearly because he was kicked out of class last year. No one has ever seen Jihan in 3 weeks, so even the most stubborn stomach just knows something's wrong. He lets out a loud yelp of frustration as he leaps into the air and shouts, "Stop being lazy." The guy got mad and slammed his head onto the wall, while yelling, "Jihan's a dead load, and we're fine without him." You're standing in the ruins, feeling a surge of wild, insane energy that makes you look as if you've been summoned by lightning. In the background, Kay was literally shaking and staring at the energy he was leaking away with a wide-eyed expression of total disbelief. She's jolted into overthinking as the news hits. Jihan got a mutant monster soloing. The sky is so bright, he can almost feel it in his bones as he stares down there with eyes that glow a neon green. Suddenly, someone was watching them from across the room. The stranger in his worn backpack strides toward Jihan while he's looking at her, wondering how they managed to keep their hands on a mutant together without breaking anything. He lets out a sinister grin and thinks he's got the lucky day today. Siha rushes over to Jihan because she saw a sliced-up monster still alive nearby and wants to know if he's hurt. Jihan fell backward instantly when his voice finally stopped, and as everyone rushed for him, he was diving into the sand just in time to avoid a fall on the mud. She dropped the staff over her shoulder and held his face tight, screaming for him to speak because she feared he was going to die inside this deadly place and would just let go. She screamed the boy's name and looked around with deep concern in her eyes. Suddenly, Jihan squints his tired, wide-eyed eyes open and says, "They still have to get back to endless farming." She starts trembling with fear and then shoves her stomach out in disgust as she discovers that the man isn't actually fine at all, just completely, utterly, and painfully obsessed. She slammed him down hard, scolding herself for thinking he'd been hurt. Sia pointed out that the pile of meat was really bad for 2 alone, so they both nodded in agreement. Suddenly, the guy who had been hiding behind them stepped out, and he chimed in saying he could handle the issue. The man pulls off his winter glasses and gives a warm hello to both his girlfriend and her hero. Sashimi, who keeps his eyes closed so he can introduce himself, simply says, "My name is Isekai." He says his job is to clean up big, scary animals that are ruining everyone's life. CIA stares at the empty desk, completely baffled by the strange new business called butchering and monster transport, while Jihan gently tells her they're professionals doing exactly that for a living, even though she doesn't quite understand what kind of job this is. Sashimi looks down at the window and whispers, "They're hiding in that dangerous room. We need to get there faster." She asked if she could handle all the leftover cockatiels, so everyone knew their good friend was safe inside her house. Siha feels very happy to see that she finally took care of everything properly. She was so thrilled that a stranger showed up exactly when everyone needed it. Yet, Giant held the line with quiet suspicion because something felt wrong about him. Sashimi stares out from the edge of his bag, hoping to get a polite yes before Giant already starts calling him a shady man. Sashimi peeks through his gloved hands, saying, "I gotta check the stuff first." He gently touched those dying monsters while humming a tune. As he spoke, he declared that their craftsmanship reached a very high standard, ensuring every cut was spotless and perfectly aligned. He explained that because the work arrived so cleanly and with such precision, the buyers could afford it at a fantastic price point. She feels like she's buzzing with pure happiness as she begins to dream of finally settling down in a much larger home, all because she has so much cash to spare. A sashimi strikes with a terrifying grin so bright it doesn't even reach her eyes as he declares, "Keep those bucks safe from a meat." While he was still speaking, a quiet hand slid over that glowing purple stone he had left behind after fighting the mutant. He grabs the thing and thinks his skin will make it slippery, so he lets them take the pieces of junk while he tries to snatch the big trophy instead. A mysterious crystal hanging in the sky is actually a gem of power, something only mutant magic drops to make them rich. The moment a rock began to drift from the beach, panic erupted as Sashimi stumbled back toward the shore, unsure of where his precious treasure really was. Siha and her friends stumble back as they realize their hero has vanished from the battlefield. She scrambles to regroup while they gasp that something major has gone wrong. Sashimi was pinned down like a stone by a sea of floating rock, and he began screaming desperately for help, begging them to release him so he could save the mana crystal. As panic grips Sashimi because a voice demands to know why he despises swindlers, the stranger insists that theft isn't right at all. Saha and Jihan stare at the newcomer as he strides boldly into the room with a heart that's jumping. He's got big muscles and a Hawaiian shirt on, walking towards Sashimi and running his fingers through his messy hair while the red veins in his neck pop out. Then he says calmly, "This crystal is mine." CIA steps forward and asks if he's Doha from the Dice Guild, the #1 hero in the world. She asks what someone like him is doing in a place like this. Jihan didn't even care about the surprise, clutching the mana crystal tightly as he snapped back at him for claiming it belonged to a much higher-ranked hero. The two men stare down at Doha as he says, "I came specifically to kill the mutant and get the crystal." They exchange a glare. Jihan's eyes suddenly glowed with a blinding green light as he asked himself why it mattered so much at all when the club had already ordered him away. Suddenly, his mind raced with calculations, and a series of glass windows appeared on his screen to show exactly how likely the team was to win against Doha. Doha leans heavily on the back of a chair with a heavy sigh, letting out a sharp breath as he speaks to Jihan. "You definitely misunderstood that person." Jihan freezes in his seat, then quickly turns around and disappears into the crowd. Suddenly, Doha walks back to where the hero has been hiding and says quietly, "It wasn't just a question, it was an absolute order." Jihan was hit hard and looked at Doha, who seemed to move faster than anyone else in the room. Giant found himself trapped with no chance to move, as he suddenly realized that his face was already smearing onto the dirt. The guy wearing flip-flops slammed his head hard onto the floor while whispering that he wasn't asking for permission to touch Jihan. The protagonist stares up at Doha, whose face whispers, "I want to get back on my feet," before Doha turns around and pulls Jihan's head right into the carpet. The scary giant Sashimi watched from his balcony and decided he needed to make sure everyone ran away before the monster made it inside. The story starts with me stepping in to tell you about that mysterious man from the Dice Guild. He is actually Doha, and he's one of the country's top 5 heroes. The mysterious genius is Earth's elemental master, and he is truly the sole person to hold such a rare skill. He's a brave hero who wields magic for everyone around him. Doha stepped in front of CI and shouted sharply at Jihan, telling her to get moving right away while she yelled back. He tells her that staying away from the fight would actually make things much smarter. Jihan laughs as he sees his king fall into a pile of bugs, though he's secretly thrilled about the victory. CI stares down the floor, her face twisted in a small pout as she sees that he's actually bluffing. "I'm so mad I can't stop hitting my knees." Jihan yelled as he smashed his palms hard against the floor with a wild grin. Jihan stares hard at him and demands to know why he's still alive after he tried so hard to take his life away from him. He's so mad that he's screaming, yelling about how Doha must be dead right now. Jihan unleashes a powerful gust of wind that violently shoves Doha back toward the wall. Doha managed to stop the explosion, though the force of the blast was so strong that Doha's body continued to fly through the air like a ghost. He's stumbling over the dirt as he stares at his reflection and thinks, what the hell just happened? He felt so certain that his hard work had finally finished crushing the old guy's head right in front of him. The kid in Doha always wears a disguise that makes everyone's heart skip a beat. He stands up looking a little rough and ready for the game. Jihan instantly caught Doha's unsteady legs as a massive shockwave swept through the arena, sending him tumbling toward the edge of the stage for a final moment before he was completely stopped and saved by an elemental force that had just appeared in his path. Not only did he hide his courage so he could plan an unexpected attack later, Doha laughed at the news of his battered boyfriend, calling him a funny guy. Suddenly, the power in Jihan's hands flares up as if he was holding a superweapon. The screen flickers with a pop and asks itself, are we still going to keep fighting? It's so scary that the chance of death is actually 95% now. The hero stared down Doha as he dug deep, pouring every ounce of his mana into a final strike so powerful it felt like magic itself. Yet the city still stayed unscathed. The air in the arena crackled with excitement as Jihan accepted that champions like him were truly out of place compared to everyone else, while a cloud of dust lifted from the ground around him as he finally stood up and knew defeat was just a matter of time away. A big guy in flip-flops crashes down on the dirt and shouts, 1 point a game. Who's ready for round 2? Jihan throws his mana crystal hard at Doha instead of firing an attack. He told himself he had won the fight and could keep the prize for sure. The hero is shocked to find Doha staring back with such fury over the kid's bravado, and then he asks, so really do you think you can just give up like that? The protagonist laughs it off, insisting, well, the crystal was what Doha wanted anyway. Jihan takes his cue from Article 38, Section 9 of the Hero Law, where he's told he must hand over Doha to get off the hook. But Doha feels this was a mistake because everything has been going right lately, so he starts yelling about how things are becoming too good and demanding more time. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted the standoff. Doha looked back and remarked that someone had arrived exactly at the right moment. Look, 2 beautiful helicopters are flying high above us right now. Doha paused in mid-sigh, clutching the crystal tightly as the guild's reinforcements finally arrived, turning a quiet moment into a tense one. She jumped up from the ground, tossing a handful of gold coins as she pointed toward the line of armored trucks where the Hero Association was hiding their vehicles. The woman swung her legs out of the helicopter as loud thunder rolled through the air, yelling frantically to Mr. Yun, you're leaving by yourself? You got nowhere else but your own door. A man wearing flip-flops lights up a mana crystal while whispering, hey, I've got some business to deal with, but she's already saying she hates him for being annoying. The Doha boy sees the kid staring back with an angry look, yelling that no one else is coming to help in another attempt. Doha laughs and mocks Jihan Yu's humble entrance of the Epic Guild. Doha pulls out his tips right now, so everyone can beat the top 3 before they start the next round. He looked over the character and said, I think I should actually suggest him. Jihan felt completely puzzled after hearing the question and asked, why? He smiled with a grin, so wide his face felt like he was flying away, because nothing else mattered anymore. A squad of helicopters soars into the sky, leaving behind a quiet zone where nothing else knows what's happening. Inside the chopper, Doha asks his assistant if he heard him. He tells her to put a recommendation for the WoW with airbags, and the protagonist steps forward. The assistant argues back. She points out that the exam is in 2 days, and she cannot just recommend random people without a reason. She explains that her guild hasn't even finished its official setup. Then she gets frozen in place like a statue. The world spun around as she carefully lifted Doha's hand to check for injury. Then she frowned, wondering just how the mysterious wound had appeared without anyone else noticing at first. Epic Headquarters was buzzing with excitement as Doha's cheerful smile whispered that the world would be filled with so much joy. He's clutching the plate so tightly he wants to die while a chef serves him sashimi on his knee. Sashimi pleaded hard to make it only 1 minute while the 2 guys hurriedly put aside their apologies so they could get ready to beat them up. He heard people discussing how high their exams were going. The guy pointed at the clock to show he was going to miss by 2 days, so he asked if they could actually handle it with what they had right now. He pointed his gun right at the machine and shouted, we're basically asking for a pass. He offered Sashimi a chance to buy premium gear for the upcoming tournament, promising that if Siha and Jihan didn't want it anymore, they could beat him afterward. Siha and Jihan exchanged a glance as they looked at him, and together they decided to trust him for one final time before telling him to go ahead. You stand in the shadows of that cool weapons shop, waiting for the next move while the lights hum under your feet. The sushi chef pulls his chair out, letting the room breathe as the first guest steps forward. The waiter who is already there now waits quietly in the back, watching with a quiet smile. He looked a little nervous as he spotted the empty room and muttered, "There's nobody there." Sashimi scolded him because CI got annoyed after being asked to clean the dishes again. A voice suddenly popped out behind them, asking exactly who they were. A strange stranger giggles and tells the shopkeeper that the store isn't open for now. He immediately follows up with a question about what they're looking for. A loud voice from behind points up at the scene, and someone is immediately told that the figure right there is a dwarf blacksmith. The story begins when the narrator discovers that dwarves are not just clumsy builders, but masters of insane magic at the forge. They build S-rank blades that are so incredibly popular among top-tier heroes they can't get enough of. She stared at that tiny dwarf and told him she had never seen one in her whole life. He nodded, and it was all settled. The girl rushed over to thank Sashimi about finding a real connection. Yet his face vanished like smoke as he slipped away before anyone could reach him. A rough blacksmith stood tall and said, "I'm not a dwarf," as someone laughed at his foolish claim. He insists he's a real person who spent all of his days living in South Korea. It's so totally shocking that they found out his name means Korean. Sheila is furious when Jihan arrives because she knows any I could be her own, but he insists on showing his ID before anything else happens. The smith asked if he was part of a comedy team and handed over his ID card. Yet when he looked closer, it turned out to be nothing more than a fake certificate for someone who actually isn't a dwarf at all. Jihan squints at the photo to ask himself, "Am I actually really only 27 years old?" Jihan knows that someone might try to fake his name and steal his ID, so he immediately rushes to call the police while Seiya watches from the shadows. A bitter realization made her sigh as she realized Sashimi might have been up to no good. Instead of going back home, she decided to call the police, yet the blacksmith simply stopped listening to the argument about his work and wandered off into the night. He spotted something unusual in Jihan's sword and asked to see it for a moment before returning. Jihan asked why the smith was looking at that knife, and the old man held up the handle to check if the scratches had left any memory of when this blade first came into his hand. He stares at the sky and wonders if Giant is actually a good wind expert. Giant freezes in surprise as the smith replies, "Any first-class blacksmith can tell if you're a hero just by examining your armor." Oh well, he adds that this particular weapon isn't up for battle because it's actually junk and wasn't designed to withstand the fury of an element. The smith pauses before his forge and whispers, "I'll make you the finest weapon anyone can ever think of." The hero returns home, not with a sword, but with a promise of infinite strength. The boy grabs his axe and watches the metalworker spell out the name of the legendary blade, Hoyolnam. He laughed out loud as he said, "Oh, terribly?" The exam day never truly arrived. Only a flash of lightning cut through time to remind you that even when things seem to stop moving, they're still running fast. A door handle slips out from a sturdy door frame when someone carefully reaches for the top of it. It's a crowded scene where a magical girl with gas canes and the main hero make their entrance to the big exam hall. The crowd was buzzing with excitement as people started pouring in their favorite Siha comments. Jihan was staring blankly in the void where his mind used to be when he suddenly realized it had gone a very long time without even taking that final exam, which really hurt because he'd been kicked out of the Kiros Guild after all. Suddenly, a whisper from behind caught his ear, "Looser," and then the crowd began to spill out, talking about Jihan's life as he walked past. The group gathered to discuss how much their leader had refused to leave Kiros behind them. Yet one man insisted that perhaps he could still be the kind of hero who chose to stay and try again. Jihan stood up, leaning closer so Siha could hear him whisper, "Does anyone else see that everyone is ruining the show? I tell her she just needs to tune it out." He thought back to Doha and felt a wave of relief because nobody in Buckian knew about the crazy events. He decided to push himself hard and try our hardest in the end. A loud voice crackles in the air before anyone else can react. The speaker snaps back and shouts, "Stop. We're doing our best to get out this messy job interview." He pauses and whispers the truth inside his head as if looking back at the past. The guy checks the room and whispers that nothing here deserves a special mention. He walked straight up to Jihan's face, knocked the air out of it, and shouted loudly that he wasn't up to standard. That guy's famous as Xiang Bang or Xiang Bang because he's a real name, and people know him by those two nicknames. His glowing eyes darted around the dark room while he cursed inside himself about Doha. Xiang Bang insists he wants to hear from Giant, and he's sure the guy agrees. The screen flickered with a warning sign as the numbers flashed on Doha's watch, and then Jihan blinked in confusion. "What are you saying?" he asked softly. Cut to Doha. He is chilling as he opens a cookie, and his assistant steps into the frame from behind. It was a strange moment when she confirmed what he had asked for. That's why she found what looked suspiciously wrong while looking at it. Doha asked why she chose Xiang Bang as her judge. Back at the exam hall, chaos broke out with a chaotic bang as everyone went wild for one last chance to get in. Xiang Bang stands tall at the center of the arena, waiting patiently as 3 eager extras rush toward him. The boss snapped at the team members who entered the meeting completely out of order and forgot their original plan, treating every minute as a lesson on how to get ahead when you don't know what's wrong yet. The boy shouted, "It's showtime," in a loud voice. He flew away from the group effortlessly. He bashed them hard and called them amateurs. 3 tough guys crashed into the ground, and that was when Xiang Bang stepped up to grab them, leaving everyone else behind. The announcement sent a loud wail of alarm through the hall as Group 12 was officially disqualified. 3 brave observers watch as they stand behind a single, broken mirror that forces them into a strange new world. One of the people shouted with excitement, "Damn, someone asks if that's too harsh," while she worried about how soon everyone would stop passing. Now, we meet Han Saekim, that man with the defective brain who holds the title of 4th evaluator. He walks over and says, "All right, folks, here's the ranking. Just 5 people are actually normal civilians who happen to be the top hero of their own town." Meanwhile, another evaluator, Hano, looks at him with a grin and asks, "What are they going to tell the bosses?" Finally, a hooded man walked over and told everyone to get ready for the final group. John's big name makes everyone want to know what he does. That moment when someone finally gets to see the guild in action feels like a dream come true. He nods at the arrogant man, knowing exactly who he's talking to, a kid he personally recommended. He pointed out proudly that nobody in the group was really a member of the Dice Guild. A mysterious whisper from the crowd tells Siha and the protagonist that they might soon be given a real-world lesson before leaving the exam hall. They grabbed their guns and stepped right into the ring. The judge with a broken mind thinks the hero stands like a rock, even though he can't bend or shift easily when needed. Sia Gangbang is actually the captain of the team. Suddenly, a window popped open on your screen. The teacher holds their hand for a 5-minute test run and hands out the rulebook for the 4-rank student. The world is waiting for them to either save themselves with a clear head or let go completely and show up exactly where they are meant to be. A girl with big airbags freaks out when she realizes the 2 rookie cops aren't going to shoot anyone just because they're too young to handle it. Xiang Bang unleashed an incredibly powerful aura and stared down at Jihan, who was baffled by the fact that he had fought through all these enemies completely on his own, leaving no trace of harm anywhere. Jihan turns to Siha and says, "Cover him, exactly like you did back at the MA zone." Her face lights up with a big smile as she nods silently. Jihan presses his buttons hard and chases her away from the dangerous monsters, telling her clearly that the fight will soon become much tougher than they expected. Xiang Bang immediately fires his cheap shot and throws a brutal kick right at Jihan's chest. Jihan is so upset because he feels the hero was blocked while he was trying to stop him before he even reached the bell. A loud, deafening roar shook the empty arena as a massive blast of fire and smoke erupted from the ground below. Xiang Bang rushes Siha like he's ready to give her a free dental procedure before she realizes the situation. The punch flies straight into the air as he grinds forward with a force so strong it shakes the room around him. She cannot look at the person behind the glass. That looks like a wall of ice stopping their path. Bang is puzzled as he stares at the screen, wondering exactly why the person blocking him doesn't seem to have reached him yet. He turned his gaze toward the side where the shadows seemed to stretch, instantly realizing that the person standing there wasn't her at all. It was someone else holding her tight against him from afar. Jihan lies broken on the ground, yet he managed to save him while Xiang Bang laughs and admits his mistake was far worse than that, before Xiang Bang slammed down Jihan's chest one last time and began sprinting away. The man grabs his wooden sword and bolts into the fray. Jihan scrambles up and starts running for his life as the guards try to block him with heavy kicks at top speed. Xiang Bang is shouting and telling his rival that the gap between their strengths is huge, and yet, despite holding a mere wooden stick, he manages to shatter whatever they try to defend. Jihan's sudden glow lights up as he realizes he must pull back from his own proximity right now. The pilot fires a massive blast of wind that instantly throws the test system back into chaos. The sky drops down for Xiang Bang with an effortless grace as he launches into his backflip, landing gently on the grass below. I click my tongue about Giant being a wind spell, which makes him annoying to fight, while Jihan's movement catches up before he can even move. And then, with his disappearing ability and hasty, he vanishes instantly right beside Xiang Bang. In the dark of Xiang Bang's obsidian eyes, a shadow looms from the shadows and knocks at his door. Back in that quiet observation room, someone stares him down and asks why he was chosen to be an evaluator. It turns out this is bad news for Epic, who immediately agrees it must have been a trap. Doha tells you that Xiang Bang is the sole swordsman who can cut through the wind, and in the arena, Xiang Bang flashes a wild grin before unleashing his own power. A fast-moving blade spins a swirling vortex of fire and speed in the air. Jihan got a high-speed jetpack and flew like a tornado right through the dirt, but instead of landing on his feet, he coughed up a whole mess of blood everywhere. As a tall judge watches from the top of his chair, Jihan finds himself trapped on the very bottom of the room. I admit I'm stuck in a slow-motion crawl when it comes to getting there. The hero is barely awake after a brutal battle with the mutant, yet his terrible, broken sword still drains mana like an unstoppable drain while someone else watches closely. He decides to throw the protagonist out, even though Mr. Yun gave him a sweet suggestion about how to do it. Suddenly, a figure leaps forward from the shadows and lands right beside her. Jihan squeals as she screeches for him to get out of the way. A powerful blast of energy knocked Xiang Bang sideways and left a long gap in the air behind him. Standing right at the forefront of the hero's side, the protagonist grips her staff as she announces she'll take care of the rest. The girl realized that the man was too eager to leave her alone and decided to stop hiding behind his shoulder. Xiang Bang stared down at the crowd and said, "I don't have any time left for weaklings." Meanwhile, Seha laughed and replied, "You're definitely not weak." Seha Kim reveals herself from behind those sharp pointy ears she pulled back to a confident grin. Xiang Bang sighed and said, "I've long since figured out that's who she actually is." He yells out, trying to convince a knight that the very idea of a mage fighting back against a swordsman makes sense. She snaps her fingers and launches a hailstorm of lightning bolts while hiding beneath a wall of smoke, whispering that only those who can control the element of mana truly belong to this world. She was so skilled that she could dodge every single attack with ease. She's gonna have the next big move right now. Xiang Bang stares at the girl as her hands move through air like tearing a sheet of paper. "I'll never believe what you've done, little one," he whispers before storming off into the clouds to find her alone. He spots a magical circle slowly building up behind his back, as if something big and dark is waiting for him to find out what's going on. He laughed and mocked her for the sneaky move, but then two others burst in too, leaving him bewildered. A fifth-rank fighter has learned how to fire 1,000 arrows in one quick swing while counting his moves like a master of the art of surprise. You don't see only 3. Really, the whole world seems like that too. 7 powerful spells are being cast in unison. She holds the door shut and then pulls her hand back, leaving him trapped inside. He finally admitted he had trapped him himself. The area was completely swallowed by a giant, loud bang of fire and smoke as if one big hand slammed down upon everything. She holds her breath as the blast hits her face and tries to shield herself with a quick blink. The air still smells thick with smoke, but she knows her man won't move. Yet when the haze finally lifts, Xiang Bang stands right in front of her again. He wiped his face and grinned, admitting that her clever trick of squeezing him into tight quarters was actually brilliant. Suddenly, a mysterious figure leaps in a frame and stops where the woman was standing, whispering with a frown, "You're just too slow." Seiya felt a sudden wave of shock as he managed to withstand every single 7 spells before falling over. Xiang Bang watched from the shadows and told himself he had only been waiting so the hero could finally act. He grabs his blade and laughs at Jihan, telling them his rough way of winning will cost him everything he has left. Then Jihan finally understood. He wasn't just using a blade to drain mana. He was letting the fight happen all by himself, just like an ordinary student playing with a toy sword. Jihan decided to change his plan entirely. Instead of spreading out his energy, he squeezed it all into one tiny spot at once. He finally pushed the button, and with a roar, his final sword flew toward him like a star. It suddenly jumps out into the empty hallway and sees that all those shiny trophies have been hidden away in a pile of paper on the desk. A sharp knock sounds at the doorway, and a young man standing by the window shouts, "Come in." A blond man with striking blue eyes made his way into the room and immediately told the squad leader about how things stood with him. The boss's voice sounded like a whisper he'd made over the phone, and everyone else was quiet right now. The boss asked Gangyu how she was adjusting to the group, and the blonde clarified that she meant Gangyu Kim instead. The boss decides to ask about that disgraced guy who just left the team, because now he's going to see if he can get back in. We step into the world of Yunga Park, with a cool breeze blew on a cool morning, and the owner of the Kiros Guild stood by the window, watching the sky turn orange. The blonde admits there have been some stability problems, yet she's putting them back together. Zhangze steps up confidently, telling Gangyu that they'll soon take over the hero role, but the blonde looks a little worried. He pulls out something else to tell them and drops it right away. Jihan finally climbed to the top of his class and won all 5 exams. The boss looked bewildered as he questioned the trashy hero about how he managed such a mess after he barely scratched up his own name. The blonde says that apparently Doha personally told him about the news. Then Zhang screams at him with a voice full of shock, asking to repeat what he just said exactly in disbelief. The crowd roars as the spotlight hits the final moment of battle in this spectacular arena. He stands straight up and looks down at that cool boy. The judge stares down the floor in defeat, heart pounding like a drumbeat as he watches the students fall over him one by one. Xiang Bang looked at the crowd and asked, "How did this rookie catch Mr. Yun's eye?" The guy sighed deeply and admitted that Jihan was actually the winner. Doha laughed at how easily he missed mentioning that the little one was actually a master of elemental magic. Later, the pair took a rest in peace. Jihan laughed and said, "How did you get there in such a short time?" While the girl blinked her eyes at him. He peered closely at the map and wondered why that name sounded so familiar, like a secret plot being played out all along. She watches him turn toward the water, whispering that her effort at keeping the audience distracted was truly amazing. In return, she gently corrects him with a small smile. "Oh no, really nothing." Jihan grinned and told her the good news. They had officially passed the battle evaluation. Jihan reminds her that the celebration is too early and they are still on time for the interview. The crowd finally sits together to watch others vanish into a dejected silence. Then a single voice shouts, "We're the next one." The evaluator praised how solid the team's preparation was, while another soldier shouted about those very interesting moments in action. Saya and Giant step inside the hall like brave travelers heading straight for their goal. The polite man began talking about starting an adventure, telling everyone to be ready without resistance. But the moment he spoke, a sudden interruption happened where a stranger shouted, "We must fail him." Dangali, the leader of the Warriors Guild, scoffed at the tank commander for calling him arrogant. He immediately questioned why he would dare fight someone who couldn't really save anyone in real danger. The team leader storms out and shouts, "This is absolutely ridiculous. Nobody is supposed to make it through." The squad member nods approvingly, claiming the rules are unfair, so they can be kicked right away now. Meanwhile, another guy points out that if the team goes this way again tomorrow, nobody will even get a chance to play. Jihan's curiosity kicks off when they suddenly shout over the noise, but he immediately notices that their voice is meant to scare people away and make others forget who they are, rather than just show them something scary. The polite man lets go of the loud shouts, thanking everyone for joining him and telling them to relax. Siha then introduces them as members of Epic. As he saw his paperwork fail, the gentleman hurriedly smoothed the papers before him so they could be moved on to the next page. He looked around at the empty field and said proudly, "We're the only ones who actually won our fight." Jihan hit back with a sarcastic grin while the CIA members cheered, smiling along in delight. The dark-haired man cut in and said, "Since we've cleared the evaluator, there's no need to fight another round." Suddenly, that ugly duckling in the panel asks a CIA official a strange question. "Can you even see with your hair down?" and offers to help by tucking it behind her ears. CIA lets out a sharp breath as she pulls her hair back, and the group of guys immediately goes wild with surprise at what they're seeing. The crowd roared out a loud yell, so they could see exactly where the good deed was being done. He noticed the catfish in the corner and quickly told everyone he's just a strange little guy who loves to be seen as an elf, making everyone laugh with his silly behavior. He licked his lips menacingly while apologizing for believing she had pure blood. He's a dark-haired guy who called him right away and said he was being rude because his attitude was terrible. It's back time for the ugly duckling to apologize, this time using words he only knows. "I was just making a terrible mistake." The man pauses and stares at the protagonist as if he's about to start a new war with their enemy. Seiya told Jihan everything was all right, and he sighed, wondering if that annoying figure was really the real problem. The ugly duckling hesitates because a guy wants to see how they react before they can even ask. Seiya nods with a knowing look as the interviewee admits that his father actually worked for the Research Institute in Kyoto, just to make sure they aren't too busy to care about monsters there. She told everyone she was right because her dad had shown her exactly how to defeat the mutant cockatrice based on his research data. The interviewer was completely stunned by the news, feeling like he'd witnessed something far greater than just 2 people in a tiny group. He noticed the ugly duckling staring at him and asked, "In 10 years, I've never seen a half-Eve leader run a guild." She stares at him as if waiting for a message from far away before he asks how she can possibly solve everything in the world. The young woman stared at the screen and asked herself what to do when an army of elves threatened her home country. She knew that if they invaded, she had no choice but to stay safe. Suddenly, a voice whispered from behind her. Sae freezes. The girl froze, completely stunned by the sudden shift in direction and tone. She jumped back into the chair and shouted, "Are you sure you want to drag this out again?" Jian snapped at the interviewer after he got a confused look. Does anyone else know that being a common man isn't just a mistake? He steps forward to check out how many people actually think that's normal when you're trying to be cool with your friend's guild. Jian pointed a finger at the speaker and said, "I know you think your skills are important, but look here, we didn't care about testing them. We were purely trying to scold our guild leader." You're right. The two other people standing by were genuinely shocked because they couldn't comprehend how terrible a train wreck looks like compared to the one everyone was watching. The ugly duckling fires back, shouting, "As the interviewer, I have every question I want." Jian stepped forward with a defiant grin, declaring that if he could keep one of those guys insulting his guild, then nobody would bother passing. The board's voice booms over with orders to stop, demanding they pause before anything goes wrong in this chaotic fight scene. The CIA leaves the room, and she feels completely beaten up because everyone thinks they will fail forever. As the camera pulls away from the massive doors of Epic headquarters, a cool breeze picks up and smells like rain, casting long shadows across the dusty walkway where a lone figure stands watching the city lights fade behind him. The girl with those huge airbags in her mouth was pretending to drink water when she looked down and felt so unhappy about it. CIA gently took Jihan's hand as he tried to walk away from the classroom, feeling deeply sorry that his messy homework and nervous study had turned into an embarrassing situation. She actually thanked him for standing up for her right then. Smiling face with smiling eyes, Jihan noticed something odd because he never saw anyone else defend someone exactly like this in the past. So he decided to try it again and keep his phone open while she refreshed the web. The man reaches out to touch the woman's shoulder and sees that she feels trapped by her own actions while her hands are constantly shaking and screaming in protest. Jihan smiled and said, "I'm just curious." Suddenly, a CIA official shouts that the site has released its findings, and she immediately glances at her monitor to see what's been announced. She shouts, "The squad is rising to a 4th place," and they both freeze instantly. They stare blankly at each other, completely stunned by the sight of what they're actually looking into. The other judges stopped in their tracks when they saw the ugly duckling stand up and demand a reason for his choice. The friend asked him if he was absolutely certain about that drama back then. The man smiled brightly and said, "Yes, I am sure." But when he tried to apologize later, his face grew a little sad again. He's admitting he broke the line, yet insists he only tested them out of curiosity. He tosses an apple into the air and catches it before he says his name. Then he wonders how far those two arrogant brats will jump, but in his mind he smiles and calls Jihan and Seiha arrogant. He thinks they're going up the ladder for power, yet that doesn't seem like kindness. The ugly duckling vows to destroy their lives later. The two people in the room staring at their screen were completely stunned and confused. Did the group really make it all the way through? The scene jumps back and forth between two different parts of Pooh City. A high-speed bus suddenly stops right in front of you. A sea of cheering crowds, filled with banners and reporters, waits outside. It was a quiet moment when the hallway doors finally swung wide, letting a figure step out like a ghost in the dark. He walks up to the camera and says, "Mr. Kim, you got any good shots?" In a loud noise of screaming, someone in the crowd tears into words about guts. Meanwhile, security guards strain against the pressure, holding the audience apart, and yell at everyone to get away from it. Guts pulls out a fake smile, so loud it makes people think he knows better than anyone else that staying back is actually safer. As the pack of Guts soldiers steps into the MA zone, everyone calls him a knight and shouts for good fortune. The moment Guts steps into that black wall, his face dissolves into a mask of pure white terror. The loud buzzing from outside was so fierce it nearly tore his ears out. Guts snorts loudly at the report from his teammate about extra attackers, clearly furious when the number of troublemakers suddenly grows to a new record. Behind the thick wall of Guts, a voice rises up to ask, "Did Guts see her stand right there at the door?" He's telling a story about Gang Yu Kim, who almost made a scene by staring right into her eyes and saying that she might almost throw up. Gang Yu changed his topic to ask what Guts actually enjoys, but Gut only replied that she likes beautiful ones. Gang Yu laughs and tells everyone that he'll meet up with a group of lovely girls in the club tonight, inviting Guts along for the ride. Sean limps over, and she gently pulls his hand away from the trash, as Mia Lee steps forward to tell him he shouldn't be talking about it anymore. He pulled back with a smooth ease as he said, "Sean Lim could definitely make it." She laughed and challenged him, "But you think I'd actually follow?" You know how Gang Yu knows the exact buttons and why she's so drawn to them? He convinces her with a story about many supermodels wanting to be together, and she drops in love right then and there. She's so thrilled she decides to pull off a big surprise by welcoming her guys who look like they could win, while Ganyu worries just how easy it really is for the scammers to trick people into giving them those good looks and money. With a little bit of pressure, he danced with everyone all at once in his palms. But as he stares into the quiet room where he finally sees Mia Lee, he turns his back on everything and hits a solid wall, trying to figure out why she's staring at him like that. Mia Lee noticed he was staring blankly, so she asked if something was wrong. Then he quickly looked away and told her it wasn't an issue. Inside his head, however, he figured he needed to stay on the edge of her attention all day. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled in Guts' throat as his eyes snapped open to catch the sound of heavy boots approaching. 3 strangers sit in a quiet corner. He points at the guard on duty and says, "Hey, you've been staring right here for too long." The guard nods slowly, checking his watch before saying, "Yeah, I haven't seen the guy inside that MA zone since about 3 months ago." Scarface stared at the man and asked, "Who?" The man simply looked down and said, "The one who carried your bag." He laughed at Guts' joke about quitting, then grinned when Jinyu stepped forward to take the role of their new squad support. Scarface looked at the truth with a smirk and said, "I am so glad you're asking, Kim." Scarface told Jihan that they got away from the gang in about 1 year back. The man whispered that Jihan's actions felt like stepping into entirely new territory, completely baffled by the sheer absurdity of his own way of moving through the crowd. Scarface said that if Jihan ever needed a guild, they should tell him so he would be content. The two group exchanged a final nod of thanks as they walked away, leaving the angry Guts alone in the hallway. Did someone ask Jihan if he really was amazing? Ganyu smiled and said, "Oh, well, I certainly didn't hear anyone mention a deadweight blocking my path to January." Then he chuckled, noting that Scarface had been unfairly praising the person in his way. Ganyu was still talking when Guts suddenly grabbed his sword and slammed it down. Guts yelled in a rush as a giant, spiky dinosaur lunged toward every single person at the table, shouting over the roar of the beast before he finally grabbed his own blade to cut through it. The hunter grapples with the heat spreading through the forest as he sets his weapon ablaze for the last time. He sprinted forward like a hero toward the scary monster, and suddenly, everything went wrong in an instant. The girl was so stunned that nothing could have been more real than what she heard, and the crowd around her quickly understood exactly how much they had lost. The traffic guard shouted that the place was now a 4th rank zone, shouting that everyone must move out right away. 2 people were staring at the house. One was scared that prices would crash, while the other felt empty and wondered how much he could afford to move back in. Kim stepped forward and asked Jihan about that spot, hoping to find a better place to stay. Jihan made sure everyone knew this was his 4th area and that the saber-tailed tiger team was officially in charge again. A tiny kitten leaped up at the 2 people who were standing right next to him. Jihan sprinted after Seiyu and yelled, "Run toward the tiger." Seiyu started casting his spells with a spark of excitement in his eyes. He swung his sword with a sharp snap and started sprinting away like a storm cloud chasing something wild. The fierce tiger caught the lion in a single, devastating blow that sent shivers down his spine and left him trembling. Kim looked at her hand as if she didn't know what to do next, wondering why the monsters were getting stronger just now. "We're not ready," she whispered, looking up with wide eyes. Jihan said the mutant he had been fighting before was actually an unusual one. Kim wondered if she could magically get the tiger's body to the basement while Jihan called in for a professional cleaner. Suddenly, someone screamed for help and made the whole world shake around them. Seiyu's voice boomed over the radio as he announced that the only person in town who wasn't fleeing was the one he was telling everyone to run away with. That voice felt exactly right for Jihan, making him feel as if someone had known him from day one. They stood right next to him, shouting that they had joined an amazing, heroic group and asked everyone what was going on. Sashimi begged her friends to help save the kitten before Kim noticed him, and immediately told her, "You're the one cleaning." The kittens ran away as fast as they could. Seiyu said, "Well, I guess finding him here was quite a lucky day. Fate must have picked out the perfect person for his life." Sashimi was surprised when she finally asked if he had agreed. Instead of accepting, he told her he only needed a quick break in the restroom before we got back inside. Jihan made the decision to let it go because Sashimi gave him great gear, and Seiyu praised how kind-hearted Jihan always is. And then Jihan finally asked himself why Sashimi wasn't also cleaning up. Jihan told everyone he was fully trusting Shizumi even after that scary memory came back. Meanwhile, Sashimi waved goodbye and handed over every single body to him, leaving no one behind to hold on. After Sashimi sprinted to the building, he repeated loudly, "We can count on you." Seiyu looked worried as the question hung in the air, wondering if he would try to trick them one more time. Then Jihan stepped forward and gave a reassuring nod, saying that even though they needed his work, Seiyu shouldn't let go. Suddenly, a voice shouted that everyone should get out before the monsters got too dangerous. The speaker raged, shattering calm as they urged everyone to honor every creature by treating them with full respect and love, turning the words into a powerful call for universal compassion. Jan pointed out that CIU was wondering if these people belonged to a group fighting against bad guys. The other guy explained that the IUPC is an organization that wants everyone to live together despite monsters and humans alike. They both noticed that protests in the MA areas had suddenly gotten more popular lately. He stood up and said plainly, "No way," because the man who asked whether Jian liked that ideology was simply trying to make fun of him. "You asked, are we going to stand firm despite our friends getting hurt by these monsters?" The security guard warned everyone that the door was locked by the very people who needed help. So the bystanders rushed forward not just to save the hero, but also to stop the dangerous beasts before they could hurt anyone else. The guard shouted, "We've broken down the wall," while his neighbors cheered loudly, shouting for the brave ones to arrive and stop them from running away. CIU and Jihan stumbled upon a crowd of determined activists. Jihan stared at the crowd, thinking about what kind of strange things they must be doing. A frantic protester screamed for everyone to look at those strange, glowing creatures that were suddenly everywhere. The girl snapped her finger at a man named Jack, demanding to know why some people are so cruel while others pretend they're saving the world. Just then, another activist stepped forward and apologized dramatically, saying that heroes who act like murderers have absolutely no right to claim themselves as saviors. Jihan was stuck in a fog of anger because he didn't know what to do about it, hoping the group could take care of things himself. Just as Doha walked in, everyone knew he meant for the group to leave immediately so he could get back inside. The kid pointed out that all of his friends had already gone home, so he questioned whether anyone was still working on their business with him. Doha slammed his fist into the dirt to summon an endless wall of rubble, while Jihan yelled, "Who the hell are you?" and then laughed maniacally as the ground collapsed around them. Jihan laughed as he stepped forward from behind the wall, then asked, "So, what are you going to do now?" while Doha waited silently in the shadows behind him. Some folks called him the Earth Dragon, while others saw only a clown. In the West, he was known simply as the Earthquake Man. He laughed and shouted, "I'm not the hero. I'm just a bad boy who likes to go crazy." A startled bystander gasped in alarm, shouting, "That's the bad guy, Doha Yun," as everyone else asked what the top-ranked hero was up to right now. Jihan muttered to himself, wondering why that specific man seemed so eager to show up without a reason at all. Did he have something more valuable to do? Doha finally yelled at everyone to run away or face hell if they didn't leave now. He shouted loudly, and then a deafening explosion rocked the ground right over him. A dragon materialized right next to Doha. Jihan froze in his chair as he stared at the empty box, thinking about what could have been, but realizing the silence wasn't quiet. It felt heavy and real. The creature that was called Mummy is definitely made of earth. A king named Doha had a very powerful dragon, and he told him to stop the entire city from moving. Earth-whipped stones flew like invisible bullets straight into the face of everyone gathered. Every single protester had a tight grip around them, holding everything they were doing very tightly. One after another, they got blasted up into the sky. Jihan said he had to leave the city, yet his trusted friend warned him that no ordinary person could actually escape without risking their life. The girl stared at her own wrists, which looked like they had been knotted together by force. Doha looked like a world of gods in Jihan's eyes as he captured every person there with one touch, leaving no trace of harm behind. Doha said, "Then we apologize for holding them hostage." When he heard that Jihan and Seiyu cleared the 4th rank exam, Jihan immediately ran back to the arena and remembered how that fight was fought against the monster. Jihan laughed and stepped back as he saw Doha, who looked like an eccentric scientist trying to solve the world's biggest mystery with a strange smile. Doha's laughter turned into an admission that Bang wasn't just intense. He was genuinely nice on the inside. After Jihan shot back at Bang, he immediately questioned why that intense moment was happening so suddenly and how Bang had almost caused all of them to die. Doha laughed as he realized the hard lesson of survival wouldn't make them weaker. Instead, he found himself wondering who among the pair could truly wield true power. Doha was a distant name that Jihan had quickly realized wouldn't make it to the end of his speech, so he immediately asked to know why they had traveled all these miles for nothing. Suddenly, a new voice shouted, "Are you Doha?" while everyone else began to question him for being part of a squad assigned to a rank 4 district. Doha sighed softly as the crowd began to wave their arms in celebration, reminding them that they had finally stopped being ignored and started getting noticed everywhere. From the quiet morning, the air grew hot and thick as dozens of hard hats and safety vests clattered together on the dusty floor. One worker stood up to greet a man named Doha and asked why he isn't working. Doha simply replied that he is handling some business. Jihin saw that the Dice Guild was really busy at its base right now. Doha had just decided to widen their sports field and tried very hard not to make too much racket, while Jihan made sure he listened carefully so they could keep going. Soon they walked into that grand guild hall where everything was waiting for them. They entered quietly, making it feel like a cozy coffee shop instead of strict building office. He noticed that everything around him was quiet because the loud construction noise had completely faded away. He smiled because SCU had told him how far away her building really was from home, but he knew it didn't matter whether she asked or didn't. Giant laughed and said nothing about the cost, feeling like any normal guild member would be able to do something similar just as easily. Suddenly, a lady stepped forward and gave everyone an honest thank you for spotting the project she had created. Shu smiled and said, "I believe I am very keen to hear about how your team manages those magical wall defenses." Jiang Park stepped forward, confidently declaring that she was the leader behind the dice for her guild. Jihan's eyes widened as she saw her boss try to hide a terrible mistake by calling him Jiang, thinking he might be his assistant instead of the real vice leader. Doha walked toward Jig Young and whispered, "Where were you?" while trying to keep her purse in her pocket. She didn't believe him when he insisted on seeing the boss immediately. She only knew that if he wanted respect, he should stop acting like a kid. Jihan whispered that they sounded much bigger than the noise outside. Jihan and SCU ran down the hall after they had argued all day before sprinting into the main office to lock eyes with the man in charge. Doha finally settled in and asked exactly why they had come so far for him. Jihan was staring at the door and saw that it was holding a strange feeling in its hands. Doha finally told me the news was true. That instant, a brilliant beam of light began its journey through the room. A little fox-shaped dog peered at the sky with his tail wagging and made a soft little meow like a happy announcement. Doha brought his elemental friend, Moo Moo, into the world. He then turned around and pointed at the crowd while asking them if anyone could recognize what kind of monster had been taking over their city. Jan couldn't believe what he saw. He asked if that tiny little dog was actually the same kind of creature that had become so big as a giant dragon. Doha told Moo Moo they'd meet tomorrow because the work was heavy and she wanted to run out of time before noon, but she still knew this wasn't a simple job. Moo Moo stepped forward and asked why the guests had arrived, while Jihan simply offered a friendly hello back. CIU felt a sudden jolt of wonder when he saw the little dog, but Jihan only knew that this strange sight had left him puzzled and out of its usual way. He smiled at Doha and told him to call up his own element, and Doha nodded in agreement. Jihan's phone crackled, and a brilliant, glowing green sphere materialized right in front of him as the screen flickered to life. As soon as something came into existence, it let out a little gasp and began to drift away from that tiny creature. Doha laughed and said, "I know exactly which kind of wind is Jihan's power. He calls it Sylph." Doha just told him that Sylph had been the cause of the meeting. He pointed out that for 17 years while he worked on elements, Moo Moo was the only Korean person ever found there. Doha checked his phone over Jihan's records, but there was no evidence that Jihan ever worked as an elementalist. That led him to believe Jihan must have joined Epic exactly when it happened. Yet Doha couldn't accept this timeline and insisted Jihan explain how he secured the wind elemental contract in the first place. As Jihan was about to talk, Sayu moved in front of him and asked what he'd like to hear next. Sil said she had once been another, but then Doha inquired about it, and Shu clarified that it was actually her mother, Nahaf, who held that unique connection with Sylphie. It felt like Doha was finally accepting the news. He realized he had never anticipated Jihan would sign a deal with the elemental of Half, causing him to stand completely silent. Doha wondered internally if the elements should vanish for their owners to die, but he was wrong. Doha leaned back on his elbows and sighed, realizing just because everyone doubted him didn't mean anything if he finally explained the truth. He turned to announce that his doubts were nothing more than a distraction when he truly needed to say what happened behind those closed doors. Did the girl say she thought her little Sylph would get a lesson? Doha made a bold claim about being involved in the secret plot. Yet Jihan immediately clarified exactly which clues mattered by asking what they actually referred to. Doha had vowed to bring the road straight, and he smiled to his team as if the future was already painted in gold. The great leaders of the Dice Guild decided to grab the legendary epic sword for their own war chest. A stunned So froze and shouted why. Doha suddenly offered a staggering $20 billion deal to get Epic back under their rule. Furious, Siu shot to her feet and demanded to know if he was real. Doha assured her that he was, though he did mention raising prices afterward. He told them they had a choice. Either join two-person guilds or let him guide them in expanding and adding new members, while Doha agreed on personally teaching Giant about elementals and promised to keep his team from interfering with the squad's actions. Doha stepped forward and pointed at Jian, asking how wonderful that feeling could be for him. Shu stepped back into the room feeling overwhelmed by the huge offer, yet completely unprepared for what came next. Doha suggested they would wait while Jihan cut off the conversation before he could finally get his answer. The air in Doha suddenly feels thick with a quiet shock as everyone watches this one-word reply. Jihan stood with his voice tight as a drumstick, refusing to look at the shop window because he knew it was too late. Epic would never sell again, and Sihu stared blankly at nothing but emptiness. A surprise bag flies crashing through the air onto the floor right now. A sushi platter jumps out from behind a group of activists who are staring at everyone with wide-eyed confusion about what has actually happened. He finally tells everyone about his work, and suddenly feels completely lost for Jihan again. Sashimi burst into the room and shouted, "I'm so happy! I've finally done the work for Jihan." Then the room settles again, and the deal talks get louder. Jihan asks DHA to double the deal so hard that it never gets big enough for him. Dice and Epic are set for becoming huge guilds. Doha didn't let go of that grin when he heard the news, making his face turn cold instantly. Sihu, who was quiet before, finally spoke up and asked Jihan who had given him permission to make this choice. Sihu's sobs crash as he pulls Jihan into a fierce embrace. DHA laughs so hard that the sound swells even higher in his chest. Doha laughed at the absurdity of their two-man band being challenged by an entire army, and said Jihan's arrogance was completely beyond them. As Jihan steps out of the room, he confidently says he believes his friends are safe with their guild. Doha flips through his coat and asks, "Faith, you're talking as if the deal's done." He replies, "I'm enjoying you." So Doha finally steps away from her offer and leaves Sihu behind, but she can't stop trying to pull him back because he's clearly a leader right now. Shao whispers a note to his assistant and says, "You're coming back with this thing." The guy asked, "Did you ever hear of a stone that holds all that power?" And in doing so, he unlocked the mysterious crystal used by his enemy. Doha's crystal has been returned because Ji-hun asked for an explanation. Doha tells me that the guild finally settled its work, but instead of keeping it, he handed it back right away as a friendly nudge by two powerful elementalists. It was a quiet moment when Jihan thanked the man for the rest of his story, but then the scene was cut short by an unexpected interruption. Sylph was chasing the little dog as it flew straight for that hidden mana crystal right next to him. A sudden burst of bright light fills the room instantly. Doha stands right behind Jihan and tells him that the ancient crystals hold power needed to turn any living thing into a true elemental spirit. Jihan was reminded that the path to becoming strong isn't about doing all things at once. Instead, he should focus on gathering enough strength for each step along the way. Doha says that the more crystals he collects, the sooner the sea elf can turn into flesh. Jehun wondered if Sylph might even find such a life possible. Oh my god, that jump takes us straight to that cold, sharp corner in Seoul where the world's biggest music festival meets its brutal rivals. The telemarketing agent smiles warmly while thanking the customer for calling and asking if they'd like to talk about something more specific. Her voice cracks instantly as she hears her pet transform into a monster and demands he confirm that fact. She assures everyone that they won't panic, but then a man in the back of the room keeps asking if the promotion poster needs to wait 3 hours before printing. She asks her friend if the volunteer thing's going to be there on the 21st. Even though the woman in blue felt upset after the old lady hugged her, she was still able to smile kindly when the woman in gray said it could be nice sometimes. The woman in blue stands out at the edge of the TV screen as everyone else watches her share what she's doing well. She knew she could wait for enough time to see a big shift happen, and then she'd say everyone who helps people has found a new meaning in it all. A loud roar startled both of them, followed by the screech of claws and growls. The woman in blue shouted to the girl, "Darling, just look out. That giant tiger is already biting," and they both realized right then that it was exactly when it needed to be eaten. A girl in a blue shirt wonders if the delicious meal she's about to make will be light or too much for her friend, who insists that just one bite is all she really needs. A woman wearing blue steps over her chest and checks if something's hiding inside. You're startled when the door opens, and suddenly a man stands in the middle of the empty room, clearly bound by ropes that look like they could be real. A woman in a bright blue dress smiles warmly at the group, declaring with disbelief that a friendly elderly friend is still around, while another person beside her quietly complains that their antics have turned into an irritating nuisance. A sudden door burst open, and an elderly lady was hurled back against its heavy iron bars as she tried to escape into the wild. A quiet woman cries as she listens to a group of women cheerfully tell a great tiger that his food is ready. A fierce tiger leaps into a room where a weary lady sits alone, then effortlessly munches away everything until she's gone forever. The woman in blue told the tiger to enjoy her meal while she laughed about its cuteness. She pauses to think if it's truly sufficient when the woman in gray replies, "That will do," and they suddenly hear a figure move behind them. The cool air hits the car as it pulls to a stop, and the woman in blue declares, "Oh my gosh, they're all waiting for us." Suddenly, a stylish man steps out, sets off his alarm clock, and beams with excitement at every single person standing there. My Sewing Limb is his name, and he leads this IUPC branch by hand. As everyone else started welcoming him, a voice asked why they were so eager to hear about his amazing catch, those beautiful creatures. He chuckled and told them all that nobody could possibly believe how wonderful it was. The old man's voice suddenly caught the attention of everyone in the room as he announced his exciting new discovery. He pulls out his briefcase and shouts, "We've finished this." My sexy arm suddenly pulled back and fired a gun full of what looked like a bug, shouting that the new thing had gone right. Someone asked if everyone was thinking about their own story, and my sewing needle suddenly brought up a creature from another land who had just run away. The creature tried its best to grab a mana crystal for its new mutant form, but simply didn't have enough power. That was the first hurdle in everything. And then came the hardest part. No matter how hard they pushed, the thing became completely uncontrollable. Mosing Limb keeps talking until he sees the tiger and says, "That's a new adventure," as he lets the beast run away with all its strength. A massive burst of power blasts out like a giant firestorm when the tiger is finally let free. He fired the gun and felt a sudden burst of superpower that made his hand shake as the dark energy surged around him. The happy grin spread wide across Mowing Limb's face as if the world had been waiting to be seen. One person begins clapping, and the applause quickly fills the room. He stared at the masterpiece he had just made and whispered, "I never imagined I'd be looking at something so beautiful." You walk out of the hotel room and suddenly find yourself in a dark alley behind a shop named Inshin, where people are trying to sell you old shoes or mystery books. Suddenly, peaceful crowds seem like a dream, while Shurhu and Giant step into the scene. They pause just as tigers begin barking loudly. "It's not going to work," Jihan says quickly, pointing out that handling these big beasts would take way too long even after the last incident. Giant's talk about his lucky crystals makes everyone watch as Sashimi steps out from the shadows right behind him. Sashimi looked tired as he asked where Jihan had been yesterday. Sayu feels a bit jolted by the sudden silence, and then turns to greet Sashimi without looking up. Sashimi is angry because Jihan tried to take away his entire tiger family without telling anyone. So when Jihan finally apologizes, Sashimi immediately points out the gap in his explanation and demands to know what else Jihan has to say. Sashimi felt a sudden shudder that made him shake like he was being pulled back by the moonlight. And then, just as his heart began to race uncontrollably, he fell into an absolute fit of hysterical laughter, prompting his friend to ask him why he was behaving like a complete lunatic. Sashimi holds the camera steady while telling everyone to hold back as he reveals shocking details about his latest project. One glance, and they turned into a storm of shouting like wild men. The celebrated chef, thrilled by her presentation, announced a major surprise. All the tigers, the cockatrice, and any other animals at the event were gone instantly. Shu stumbles back in shock at every single zero as the screen shows 500 million won, while Sashimi stands right there behind him and shouts that this is the grand prize. Shu crawls down, finally accepting his role in helping Sashimi earn money from every cleanup, and with that acceptance comes a smile on her lips. After the big celebration, Sashimi says, "It's time we look at our deal again," and ask for another 10%. Jihan slammed the table to stop the fight, saying it was only 4% allowed, while Sashimi protested about cleanup rules. The argument never stopped. Even when Jihan tried to demand 8% again, he just kept shouting 4% at him instead of listening. The chef named Sashimi accused the man of stealing from daylight, but Jian simply replied, "It's only 4%. Sashimi remained bewildered as a stern voice interrupted him. "What are these two foolish men doing?" The voice behind them whispered that they were back home, and the girl finally looked at her own tiny hand to see what had happened since she first met her mother's dog. Suddenly, the cat snapped at her to hide behind her coat, and then the rat made an uncharacteristic twitch of its nose before sliding out from under her arm. She whispered to herself, "That sounds like a tough one," while someone else shouted over the noise, "Hey, did you see her? She's actually from the Snowflake Guild." A loud roar made people jump to their feet as a group of brave hunters chased down fierce, saber-toothed tigers through thick woods. Then they finally heard what happened next. Yuri stepped aside as a trio of drunken fools ran in from the guild hall, leaving him alone to watch them leave. Sehu's eyes twitched slightly as he watched Yuri men grow comfortable around him. He pointed out Jihan needed to rush away from the jungle so his chinchilla could catch up with the tiger, because if they stayed still, she'd be able to grab every single one of them before anyone else got close. Jihan was chatting, and then a tiny chinchilla jumped right behind his head. The beast stepped forward with a roar so loud it echoed through the room as it looked right at you, shouting, "What the hell is this thing doing behind you?" Before it could finish its warning, it just grinned and let out a wild laugh, exposing its sharp teeth in a display of pure feral delight. Jihan stayed completely still as Shu and Sashimi shouted about him needing to move, so he could reassure them that anything would be fine just in case a chinchilla tried to bite him. Then, a window burst open, revealing the terrifying chance of a chinchilla attacking him. Sashimi and Suho instantly turned their backs on the delicious-looking food as it was served to them. The chinchilla's owner said that the animal seemed to have completely stopped caring about anyone at all. She stepped forward to introduce herself. "It's a pleasure meeting you. My name is Yuri Min, and I belong to the Snowflake Guild." It was Jihan Yu who spoke up first, introducing himself as a guest from Epic before pointing out the woman beside him as Epic's leader, Sayu Kim. Yuri was curious about the animals Yuri's friends owned and asked Jihan directly for his opinion on their pet store. Jihan simply smiled as he explained that he genuinely hadn't bought anything in this shop, so Yuri felt a bit relieved by his honest answer. Yuri watched as the chinchilla gave her an odd look, thinking something was wrong, before a voice suddenly cut through the air, calling after her with surprising speed and urgency. He grabbed Yuri's hand and started his own introduction, telling her his name was Sashimi and working for Monster Cleanup Services. Sashimi told her to call him if she ever needed help with a cleanup crew, but Yuri said it was all fine. He assured her there was no need to worry at all. Suddenly, the little chinchilla jumped out from behind him and looked furious. Many bystanders watched as a poor man like Sashimi got left behind by the crowd, and the silence that followed fell heavy with unspoken concern for his fate. The crowd murmured in awe as Yuri spoke up for the first time, realizing everyone else seemed distant because she rarely treated others like friends. It didn't matter whether those two people were actually sitting right next to Doha back then. What mattered was how suddenly the conversation turned into a quiet question about them. Jihan slowly turned around, noticing how many people had already started paying attention to him. Yuri realized her bold art drew a huge crowd, so she quickly apologized to the people watching. As she stepped back from the group, she hoped they would all win big, and Jihan also said his well wishes. But inside his mind, Jihan looked at Yuri and the guild she led. Even though Snowflake hadn't seen much news in almost 3 years, knowing that the game's top team had actually risen to third place made the situation feel even more desperate and exciting for everyone involved. He looked at the empty seat and sighed, thinking he didn't need to guess anymore. Jihan had called out for Sishi, so they would all move in, and she definitely agreed. The cleanup worker didn't want anyone to vanish, so he asked Sashimi for permission, and she nodded along as the mood in the quiet apartment changed into an exciting one inside a greenhouse. They walked in together like a pair of friends who had been waiting for each other all along. Sai pointed out that the air in the lobby was strange, and they had already climbed all 5 floors of the building before finding nothing but empty halls. The Jihan guy made a quiet comment, saying that maybe the others had actually taken way too long and some of their guilds had already moved on to new stories. Jihan stepped on a stairwell and told Sai to look for a way out, but Sai sighed and wondered if the elevators were truly broken when he tried them instead of going up. The two boys began their climb. Sai muttered about his clumsy attempt at climbing stairs, while Jihan insisted that every mage must work hard on their stamina. As the crowd climbed up, a figure suddenly appeared and asked where everyone had gone. Jim was shouting over the crowd that he wanted to know exactly who they were, because his name was Jim and he belonged to the Knife Guild. The man at the top of the stairs asked, "Did you miss that sign? It says the building is protected by a Knife Guild from floors 27 to 32. Jim sighed and told the group not to make such a tough decision on their own, while C. Furious pointed out how small and unwieldy those little guilds really are. Jim explained it was a hidden rule letting him take control of those spots, so he could get the highest paying job in the game. He said big guilds decide where to go first, and smaller groups just can't do anything about it. The man who was so quick to say that everyone in the 2-member guild had to go away with a look of regret on his face. Jihan shook his head and said, "No, they aren't the ones who will leave." Jin shouted down with a look of disgust, telling Jihan that claiming those territories was strictly forbidden and he had just been told to put his head in his hands. As Jihan looked at everyone around him, he began to count out. 1 big tank, 2 soldiers, and 1 wizard. He felt his heart hammer against his ribs as the stairs became a tight corridor, making it nearly impossible for everyone to charge in together at the same time. He fired the gun he'd been holding, thinking hard about whether he could actually win this round. A man scowled and asked, "What does Jihan intend to do?" as they locked eyes. Suddenly, a big window popped open, revealing that the game was already 80% won, with nothing left to lose. Jim looked up in shock, wondering why Giant hadn't even tried to move forward yet. Jim turned to his mage and yelled about why he was stuck there before turning back over to order someone else to help. He whispered the words in his head as he began to charge for an attack. As the lights dimmed behind Giant's ear, a loud shout erupted from the corner of the room, startling everyone else who had been watching quietly. "Oh wow," she finally called back and said, "I'm actually ready right now," while already summoning a protective spell at the last second. They were ready to launch a clash between the sea and the flames together. A thunderous clash sparked an eruption of force that shattered the structure and blew a gaping hole straight through the wall behind you. Jihan and Xiaoyu ran up the stairs like a stormy train, pushing forward at maximum speed. The others shouted that they had escaped the scene. They were shaken by the sound of Xiaoyu casting a new spell over their heads. The fiery rings surged outward, trapping the men in confusion as they vanished into darkness. Jihan vaulted into the air and landed squarely on top of Guy before he could even react. A guy slammed down on Jihan with force, but Jihan didn't hesitate. He yelled, "Look at me," before shoving him back toward the wall so he could see everything clearly. A mighty blow slammed into Guy as he crashed right down on his back. He landed exactly where he began on the floor and asked, "Did you think we would manage to escape these things?" while keeping a dangerous look at him as a guild member threatened retaliation. Jihan slammed his sword hard onto the dirt beside Guy's head and cut him off. Then the man asked his friend to tell him what that guild could do if he died again. Suddenly, a new figure stepped in between them, whispering that their own team couldn't handle the threat. Xiaoyu questioned whether to end this moment immediately, as one of the trapped men wondered how far she had pushed her magic and whose hands held those powerful spells. The two extra guys had a big fight over which side of the fire to rush first, yet his partner kept saying he didn't know how to handle water magic. The old bald man muttered angrily about missing the big tiger for weeks and wasted his energy on random excuses instead of playing games. He spoke and then turned his head back toward the door. Then the woman pulled out her wand and waved a beam of pure cold fire over the raging blaze, finally putting out all the flames with one mighty blow. She yelled about the blaze dying down, and then the scene changed as a wild mutant tiger snatched away the tired bystander from her hands. She screamed desperately inside the beast's jaws as a shadow tore through the darkness around her. The scary thing she saw made her scream and run away into the night. I can't see anyone with Jihan hearing the screams coming up those emergency stairs. Jihan didn't believe in saber-toothed tigers because the screams were too loud for them to hear. He just knew there was something bigger out there waiting for him. Then he got ready with his magic and stepped forward to show everyone how it worked. Suddenly, a blinking screen popped up above him and started crunching numbers, as if he were trying to figure out how long he'd last. The tiger stepped forward from a place of darkness and was immediately surrounded by the bloody blood of its own victim. The giant beast hissed. Then the terrifying tiger lunged back with renewed fury, its paws ready to strike Jihan and Xiaoyu right in the face. Oh wow. The window suddenly showed that their odds were ticking at 0%. The mutant charged directly at them, asking Xiaoyu to tell the truth about whether it was a tiger or just an incredibly dangerous force, while Giant instantly confirmed it was one of those things. Jihan watched with wonder as he realized his world was completely new. No other mutant existed in his life at all. As Guy stumbled over a stranger who had stopped running, everyone else froze too, wondering exactly what this new face looked like. He sprinted over and shouted to the group, "I need your help," as he charged straight into the fray with a determined look in his eyes. Guy was already scrambling to flee, shouting that he had nothing left for the group to do, then calling everyone a coward so they wouldn't have to fight. He needed to tell himself he wasn't strong enough for two people to stop this mutant from coming home. A mighty beast slammed its massive feet onto the earth and sent a huge chunk of rock flying everywhere. Jihan hurried forward and shouted, "It's already here." He spun around like a blur of motion to avoid the deadly strike from the mutant at the last possible second. Jihan felt so powerful that his weapon had already shattered before anyone else even touched him. He thought he'd make this deal go so smoothly that he could finish the job in one move. He fell into deep thinking as suddenly the mutant grabbed his arm with a blade of steel and slashed through him like lightning. Xiaoyu caught the lightning strike before it could burn out, and she jumped up in a burst of pure energy to stop the flames. You knew exactly what she had said when she walked past her, because that was the last moment of your life before you broke. His powerful strike hit with all his strength, but the mutant remained unharmed because he couldn't sense any of that raw energy. He slammed his head straight into the creature's neck and sent Jihan flying as he gasped for air, spraying blood onto his face. Jihan groaned, thinking the ball was gone long before his eyes caught up to it. Sihu grabbed her wind arrow and slammed it hard against the monster's face while trying to strike at its legs. She watched the arrows fly toward her and moved so quickly they vanished before anyone could see them. He was thrown into a panic when he found himself suddenly caught in an impossible situation and had nothing left to do but stay silent. At the very last second, Yuri Min and her tiny friend arrived with a mighty plan to help them escape. The little chinchilla bolted straight for the mutant, his tail wagging with pure excitement before he even reached him. The tiger was finally knocked off balance by a swift leap from behind the chinchilla, leaving its pursuer helpless as they collided with each other in a dramatic fight before the beast escaped. Se-Hugh watched the small boy who helped him save her after all that time. Yuri Min said she heard something loud and sudden right next to her house, but when she checked around, she didn't see any enemies at all. Esahu smiled warmly at the group as he realized, quietly, that Yuri Min was actually from Snowflake. You can see Yuri looking down as he pointed out that Jian was in a really bad state today. Seihu was forced to grab Jian and run away because she promised to fight the mutants on her own, but Seiyu suggested instead that everyone else be called together to help stop them. Yuri Min reassured her that the big bear tiger wasn't strong enough to hurt her, so she stayed calm and confident with every move. Seiyu watched Yuri's eyes shift suddenly as the conversation changed from serious to warm and inviting. Yuri dove through the air with a burst of energy, sprinting toward the mutant like lightning. The tiger could not hide from the relentless force of the chinchilla pressing down on its back and tail. The tiger launched a thunderous punch that slammed into the ground, sending a mighty splash of blood across the floor. A dozen heavy blows struck the ground right now, sending a fresh wave of crimson across the floor in one swift motion. Yuri kept her head down as she shouted, "Chilla, look!" and then looked up with wide eyes at a stranger standing right there, completely unaware that she was the one calling out from above. Yuri pointed wildly at the monster and fired his arrow straight at it, aiming right for the tiger's face. Chilla rushed away from the crushing blow Chilla was just about to deliver to the beast as soon as Yuri struck him with force. A fierce tiger got trapped inside an iceberg before finally breaking through the walls of its cage and escaping. It felt like Yuri's shadow touched the mutant as she stood nearby, and for a split second, the creature seemed to leap out of nowhere without needing any help from her own hand. The mutant lunged forward as the enemies were drawn into his path. Yuri just laughed as he fired an extra round of his ice blast, leaving everyone in shock that the weapon was still fresh from yesterday's battle. Yuri stepped forward and saw the tiger leap over every shadow he could see, yet his own magic just couldn't shake the monster's agility anymore. This time meant this spell was still too slow for the mutant. A jaguar that was knocked down by a bug hit its knee and fell to the ground immediately. A very long wait was coming to Yuri as he stood in the waiting room. She told the story of how these giant saw-tailed bears had grown so strong they could crush even their own teeth. A gentle reminder that while they are naturally adaptable in all weather, even a sudden chill breaks them apart and forces them to lean heavily on their legs to stay upright. Then Yuri shouted to the tiger, "I told you so. You must have been careless with those ice arrows and let them hurt your claws." From the very top of the mountain, watching over the city, Sihu watched with pride as Yuri climbed higher and higher, always managing to avoid being caught off guard by their own luck. Jihan shouted after seeing his friend Suil run toward him and grab the pitcher. She told him she wanted to help Yuri fight the saber-toothed tiger, but he said not even a second of wait since Yuri had already won the fight. Jihan shook his head and said, "No, I'm not done fighting yet." Then he pulled out his powers to count the odds that Yuri would win, knowing for sure that Yuri was already in a serious mess. As Yuri prepared to finish off the tiger with her last strike, it whipped around and slammed into them. The screen flashed red as the window exploded, and suddenly her success rate had crashed way down to 0%. She felt the whole group charging in right at her feet, ready to tear her apart. Jihan looked out from a high spot and spotted everything instantly in the clearing, making it look like all the tigers were already gathered together at once. They had no choice but to make the final call when they were all already out of options. She looked up at her friend and whispered, "Can you handle that lift? I'll be very clumsy with it." A moment of intense connection followed by a soft blush on Jihan's face as she spoke his name. Jihan leaned over and pointed at the bright, pulsating orb in his hand, declaring with confidence that it was the sole path forward. He jumped off the roof and landed softly on the grass. Sihu was wrapped tight in Giona's arms as he launched the speed boost into battle. Sihu fell down hard and called out, "Wait, tell me first what you were doing." The fierce, saber-toothed tigers in the sky watched, fully prepared to leap down and grab their prey right as they flew through the air. Then a storm of dark magic slammed into the group with every drop. A hidden tiger slipped past the door as Yuri Min's watch, leaving her staring blankly at a stranger who didn't even know she was watching. Chill had a heart full of excitement as he stepped out from the shadows to catch her right when she was about to fall. Both Chilla and Yuri got locked up in a big ring full of scary beasts. He felt drained after the battle and complained about how many more tigers would come. She ran through the crowded swarm with a wild feeling, knowing that if the mutants got lucky, they would either kill her instantly or heal themselves as soon as she arrived. It was then that she caught the loud rumble coming from the ceiling, as if something huge were vibrating through the air. Yeah, sure, but you're right. Those two fools are exactly what's making this whole situation so much more chaotic. They didn't jump. They exploded in a pile of concrete and glass that turned into a loud, deafening roar before anyone else could even breathe. Juna shouted loudly so that Sayu could leap into the air and perform his act of levitation immediately. Sihu instantly raised her hand and began to lift herself into the air. The descent slowed down, yet Jihan knew that just making the climb slower wouldn't be enough to stop the falling from happening entirely. He found himself forced to grab the power from himself and stop them before they could really crash down on him, knowing that doing so meant he was going to save them instead. Shu smiled and said, "I think I did manage it." He pulled up a weapon and grinned at Jonah, shouting that he was perfectly positioned to crush them all in one go. He told everyone that his only task was to take a bite out of the thing exactly as he did when he caught a mutant cockatiel. He unleashed a mind-blowing attack on the jagged beasts that stretched out before him. They were thrown into a wall of burning dust before they could even move their feet. Giant gasped in defeat because he had used too much magic and was now wasting away from the end. Yuri Min stepped right in front of them, shouting that she'd already told them not to go. Jihin fired a question at Yuri, wondering whether it was even possible to thank the ones who had kindly come in for help. Yuri snapped back, insisting she didn't need anyone's assistance and that her world was already fine on its own. Jihin then questioned how she handled the tiger business at all. The camera locked onto Chilla as she stared intensely at Jihin, and that sharp anger didn't stop her even when the other guy tried to hide it behind a smile. Sia shouted about how the tiger army had been distracted by a missed shot, so everyone had to stay very close together now. Jihan pointed out that these weren't the exact same tigers from before. It looked like the mutant had magically pulled more mutants from the crowd and turned their numbers in the fight. It seemed Yuri's words were so clear that he had to assume his friend's joints might have been completely smashed, and then Jihan thought the most likely answer was that they could actually repair themselves. She fired back with such a fire that it felt like seeing a god. She paused for a heartbeat and looked back at the wall before the room faded away into a soft gray fog that held onto her memories for a moment longer than she could remember herself. The girl draped herself in a layer of tomato sauce, so thick she made the entire world seem like ketchup. Jihan yelled at a lost Yuri Min as he charged the mutant. Yet Yuri Min seemed completely unaware of what was happening and just surged forward without hearing a single word from her friend. She didn't know what happened because he was unable to understand the sudden shift in her mind while she ran off by herself. Turning back, Jihan asked Seho for a cover, and she agreed right away. A mighty pack of tigers surged out from the forest and marched straight toward Yuri Min. She screamed and threw every spell at the pack until they all vanished instantly. She stepped forward and turned around as soon as she saw the mutant, then began casting magic again. The big beast charged forward and yanked her leg hard, making her stumble backward as he grabbed her ankle. Yuri Min yelled urgently for the object to disappear from her path before she could catch it, throwing it away exactly as if it were a toy. And then she slammed her fists into the wall, letting out a sharp cry as the mutant surged forward with his arms fully spread wide to slash at the creature. She watched how quickly the mutant sprouted back, and it felt like he was regenerating in a blur of life. Her heart hammered like a trapped bird as the giant beast roared and tried to grab her with claws that were too long for her. Jihan laughed while he fired his own missile, just as she tried to eat it, pointing out that a meal like this was likely a bad idea and only gave him a stomachache instead. Jihan didn't spare a beat. He slammed into the monster, swinging his arms to crush everything in his way. It felt like a thunderstorm was cracking open the night, and he kept hitting hard to make sure they got serious hits back. Chilla leaped right into the air to join Jihan as soon as he stepped out of the way, while Sihu also bunched up with her behind him. Jihan slammed his fist against the glass as the final blast hit the mutant, screaming end into the darkness. Suddenly, Yuri Min threw himself into the air right before the man looked at the dead animal. Jihan kept his breath steady and stopped the attack before it could even start. She demanded to know exactly where she was going, forcing him to step in before the magic could start regenerating again. The woman told me she couldn't let anyone touch the animal because they were killing it alive. Ji had asked herself whether that was truly the very plan she devised, and then turned her attention to moving away from home. Then he asked, why, as she tried to explain the situation, but right then a mutant suddenly stood up from the ground. She lunged forward, eyes blazing as she prepared to tear the world apart. Shu and Jian stood frozen in silence, staring blankly at the empty room as if a strange force had turned them into statues of ice. The wild beast shrieked louder this time, and the wise guardian scolded, saying that each loud cry calls up a whole pack of tigers. The Jihan brain flew into a whirlwind as soon as his energy ran out, scrambling to find a move before the game even began. A deep voice drags down from behind, calling the moment so tragic that someone might pull them in with a strong pull of their own. Jihan jumped in and demanded to see exactly who it was. He said the person knows exactly what's wrong with Jian and instantly remembers how to fix him back up. Even though Jian passed his 4th place exam, the speaker tells him to stay strong because he is too exhausted and feels like a total disappointment. The other person thought his great talent was gone forever, while the girl said she really loved how he waited patiently until it was too late. Sukwin's crew comes along with him, but the guy tries to make them shut up before they can get busy again. The man behind the mutant's creation whispers that he guessed right, thinking the level 3 Dice Guild would actually be their crew. Hey Miss Soyen, why think about the team coming together for this mission? I guess they're going to get some help from level 1 squad. Ms. Masoyan's aide whispers a warning as she sees her boss go silent, leaving only the sound of the door closing behind them. He says it didn't end badly, even though the mana crystal was flooding his whole body for just a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, Miss Soyen Lim comments on how stunning and interesting this spell really is. In the end, he told them to stay exactly where they were going for the rest of the trip. Sukwin's team sees a freak show and wonders exactly what happens to that crazy mutant. He knows it's only a little extra labor needed for his hero team. Jihan soon steps out of the group as the rest follow him. She heads toward the city, but her friend says she's got nothing to worry about and looks completely fine. Chilla and Yuron paused in their silence as the air grew heavy with an unseen threat, realizing that danger was coming even from the shadows. The girl stares over at the others who are all looking in different directions, wondering if they're just trying to figure out what's happening next. 1 week back, Jihan was staring at his phone as he watched the latest headlines update the news feed. A stranger approaches and asks what happened inside of someone. A chef named Sashimi is making a big deal out of being at war, shouting about the battle going everywhere on TV, while Jihan looks furious because civilians are supposed to stay quiet and doesn't want to hear what's happening behind him. Sashimi insists he's been right about knowing because they were partners, while Jihan wonders why he wouldn't hire Sashimi in the first place. It was the day the 8 powerful heroes perished. The heroes team looked down and saw a huge pack of tiger soldiers waiting right in front of them. A bizarre mutant look caused a herd of tigers to panic, leading to a heartbreaking disaster. Jian said he had been feeling terrible ever since, noting that everything seemed carefully arranged and not an accidental accident, pointing out that the mutant was special in ways everyone else wasn't. He then might say that dwelling too much on this could be a mistake because the hero team will finally get all the details in their report. Sashimi joked that he hadn't seen Seiyu yet, so Jihan said she had been taking care of something else and would come home later. That moment arrived as a phone began to ring right beside him. Sashimi wonders if his cell phone could have been ringing up to talk to the entire guild, but when he finds out it was actually connecting directly with the hero AP, he immediately questions why anyone would call such a powerful character from their own home. Epic asked, "How can you help me?" When the phone rang and Yuri Min spoke up, the silence broke, leaving Epic confused for a moment before he realized what had happened. The waiter took a step back as Jihan stammered, "It's not her," and watched Sashimi look horrified across the table. Then Jihan asks himself how much he's owing the call, and a group of friends laugh as one by one passes out the extra popcorn. Yuri Min tries to apologize for choosing that line as the last one he had before, while Jihan laughs and says nothing changes at all. She smiled and asked, "How bad are your hurts?" He answered, "They're practically gone now." She asked if he was okay, and he said, "I'm all good." She feels a strange pull in the room because of her quiet tremor, and he wonders if she's testing him or if there's something seriously wrong with the situation. She explains that her words are surprisingly quick, yet she immediately asks if they would like to take a trip over the weekend. The girl popped her popcorn like a bombshell, screaming that something was wrong with the world today because she couldn't believe it wasn't happening anymore. We jump into a new room as if the walls had suddenly opened up for us. He was talking to his father when Sai asked how they were feeling. The boy asked the girl how the battle had gone with a mutant in an MA zone and whether she was hurt. She said no, but he immediately scolded her for being careless, reminding her that people who aren't prepared often get hurt the most. He told her she had to shut up because the words were repeating in a loop while he stood there. Siyu said that knowing she was working with a trustworthy person made things feel safer, even though he didn't understand why it mattered so much right now. She felt a sudden rush of embarrassment as she realized Jian had truly helped her and saved the guild. She told her dad he'd never met him, so now he stuck right back where he started. She agrees with her dad about meeting a stranger named Jihan, and the guy says Jihan was born with magic because of his mom, so he keeps asking him all kinds of cool questions about it. The boss finally gets out of his office and sees the new samples being handed in, then smiles at the assistant before they leave together. He told her to drop the phone, but she insisted on staying and asking when he would actually return to Korea. She said the funeral would come later, but when she got home, he hadn't even called yet because he was already thinking about his mother and decided to hang up on her right there. She stretches and shouts, "I gotta finish this stuff before nightfall." Her phone suddenly rings with a sudden jolt and sparks her confusion about why the man is reaching out to talk to her right now. The scene.